Hey guys, Sean here. Today, Luke and I are back with another tier list. Today we'll be doing the best OTK slash going second decks in Yu-Gi-Oh! So everyone loves a good going second deck. There's nothing better than watching your opponent go full combo, but then you just say no, you destroy the whole board and just win in one turn. And that's what we're going to rank today, the best OTK decks in the game. So let's look at the tiers here. We have There Is No Next Turn, Tenpai Dragon These Nuts, It's Over 9,000, Cringe Maju, and Battle Fader. So let's get right into it. We have a very cringe pick to begin with. We have Numeron.
I'm going to stand by my boy Numerons. I think it's a very cool deck. It relies on one gimmick. Yeah, sure, whatever. But I still think it's quite cool. And it can be quite situational because if your opponent just has like a really fat, one big beefy monster that you have to like keep beating over, you're going to be taking some damage yourself. So it can be quite tricky. But what I really like about this deck is that it's able to spam out a bunch of XZs at once. And also if that fails, there's actually other archetypal monsters that are able to go up to 10,000 attack. That C1000 Numeron monster is really funny. I think he goes up even higher. He probably goes up to 100,000 attack. It's actually crazy. I think it's really funny. Not the best. It's not going to be a top tier deck. I'd probably settle for in the middle. Just because Sean and I are compromising because Sean really hates this deck.
Yeah, Numeron's kind of cringe. So when Master Duel first came out, this was one of the biggest decks in Master Duel, just for being a really easy way to just steal wins. And I've had experiences in tournaments losing to this deck because I didn't know damage step rulings. It's just not fun. It's just a cringe deck. If you're like, you go full combo or whatever, and they just pull out the Numeron, if you can't stop the Numeron stuff, you just die. And it just feels like they do one thing and they just win. Or they just lose to like nothing because it's not the most consistent deck. But I understand the appeal, okay? I get it. You get all your small guys out, and they all attack in and get bigger and bigger and bigger. And you can use limit removal as well, which is very funny. But it's just kind of cringe. I will give it the fact that it can kind of go first. Because you spam 4 bodies on field, you can just go into Apollosa, at least on Master Duel. Or you can go into stuff like the Infinite Track Link Monster, which is unaffected by cards except for XZs. So you go into like a 4K Towers, which is pretty cool. It can do some stuff, it's okay. I guess it belongs mid-tier, because it definitely can get over 9,000. Next up we have Dinos. So you can definitely play Dinos as a going second deck. I think it's a pretty like good going second deck, to be honest. It just has the tools. So let's compare it to like Tenpai, right? You have your Misk, which is essentially your field spell for Tenpai, so it acts basically as Sangan Summoning. Just protect all your dinosaur monsters until the end of the main phase. Ultimate Conductor Tyranno is an insanely strong boss monster from the main deck, so he's pretty easy to get out. He can attack all monsters your opponent controls, he can flip them all face down, and he can burn your opponent by sending a face down card to grave instead of destroying it. It can be used to dodge some certain effects that your opponent's monsters might have, like floating effects, effects where if a card's destroyed by battle, you can just avoid them. Most dinos just have really big attack. You can main deck cards like Pank, you can main deck Kaijus. It's a really cool deck. It makes really good use of board breakers as well. So yeah, obviously you can play Dinos going first, but as a going second deck, it is genuinely very good. It just has a lot of tools that make it really good at going second.
Yeah, I definitely agree, but I'll definitely keep it at the lower end of Tenpai Dragon These Nuts, where it is right now, just because I think when you're thinking about Dinos, it definitely works a lot better as a going first deck. Just because you can set up like a lot of negates with your Evolzar dragons and stuff like that. It could still be a really good going second deck, but when you're talking about like the best OTK decks, Dinos are a little bit stronger if they're going first than going second. Don't get me wrong, they can still do a lot of really good stuff, but they can really struggle against interruptions. So of course, if you're going second with this deck, you need to get your Misk as quickly as possible, because like one fatal hit to your Oviraptor and it could like really damage your end goal. So you need to be siding in like a lot of board breakers and stuff like that. And Dino's already tight enough for rooms, so it's definitely a better going first deck, but going second, definitely at the lower end of the second tier.
Next up we have Tenpai. There is no room for debate here. It is the best going second deck the game has ever seen, to be honest. It's built as a going second deck. It's not like Dinos where it's mainly built as a going first deck. Tenpai is straight up a going second OTK deck, win in one turn. It's really good at what it does. They have Sang and Summoning, which is a field spell that makes all your fire dragons unaffected by card effects till the end of the main phase. So basically giving all your monsters protection, they just can't be touched by your opponent's board. The gimmick's really cool. You kind of go to battle phase, you attack in with your small guys, they summon more guys from deck, and then you can synchro during the battle phase into bigger monsters, and they can attack multiple times. You can go from your smaller synchros to your bigger ones, ending on your Trident Dragon. You can pop the field spell to gain double attack, and you can attack multiple times. It's really cool. The deck is very small in terms of engine, so you can run so much non-engine, so many board breakers, so many hand traps. It's just the best going second deck in the game. And even with the hits to the field spell, and even any future hits, I still think this deck, for a long time, it's going to be the best going second OTK deck Yu-Gi-Oh will ever see.
And what I really like is now that Trident Dragon has been reprinted in the tins, this deck is actually pretty budget for the most part, so you can definitely like pick this up for like on the cheap, relatively speaking, in like Yu-Gi-Oh deck terms. So that's one thing I really like about the deck. It is it's easy enough to learn, it's cheap enough to buy, and it's just really powerful. You can definitely like take games with this. It's like way above a rogue deck. It's actually a very competitively viable deck, so it definitely belongs in the top tier.
Next up, Sky Strikers.
This is pilot oriented. I don't even know if it deserves to be there next to Dinos, to be quite honest with you.
I still think it's better than Dinos. It's still more built like a going second deck, unlike Dinos.
Yeah, I suppose. It's Sky Strikers is just such a complicated one to talk about because yeah, it has a fan favorite, but like you do need a really good pilot in order to like get this to go off. I played it as a going second deck, and actually I favor it as a going second deck. But I don't know. Yeah, you know what? I would probably agree. I'll leave it in the where it is. What I really like about Sky Strikers is that it's very simple to learn because you're basically working as like a 1-for-1 type strategy. You're using cards like Engage to search a card. You're using cards like Widow Anchor to negate one. You're using cards like Sharkan to banish one. There's a lot of different ways that you can play with Sky Strikers, but it's very easy to learn at its core. So that's one thing that you can say about it. And because the Sky Striker engine itself is pretty small, you can just bring in a lot of board breakers like Raigeki and Droplet and stuff like that. And what's really good about that is most of your Sky Striker spell cards have an additional effect depending on the amount of spell cards you have in the graveyard. So say you're going second and you have like a bunch of board breakers such as your Raigeki, your Droplet or whatever. You can get a bunch of those spells into the graveyard and then you can pop off with your Sky Striker engine and get even more advantage because you have more than 3 spells in the graveyard. Engage not only lets you search, but if you have 3 spells in the graveyard, you can actually draw an additional card. Widow Anchor is very good, especially if you can fill it up with spell cards in the graveyard, because not only does it negate the effect of one of your opponent's monster, you can actually take control of that monster and you can even use it to attack as well. So Sky Strikers is definitely very good in that sense, but I do reiterate you do need a good pilot in order to get it to fully go off to its full potential.
Next up we have Trains. Unfortunately, I don't think it's the best. Trains themselves are not really an OTK deck. They have really strong OTK enabler cards. Gustav Max burning for 2k, overlaying into Juggernaut Lieb, who can go up to 6k and it can make multiple attacks. It's very good. It's a very good win condition for Earth Machine decks or Trains in general. And you know, when you see cards like that, they are very much going second cards. However, not much else in the deck really facilitates going second. When you're playing decks like Earth Machine or Trains, you're playing a lot more control, kind of defensive. It's really cool that you can make a push for a game with cards like these, but overall, Trains are not really built as a going second deck. They have really cool going second tools, but as a going second deck, it is not the best. Next up, Heroes. Okay, where do you think? Maybe here?
Yeah, put Heroes in the middle of the tier list. In the high end of it's over 9,000. What I really like about Heroes is that they have like a bunch of cards that are lately that are tailored for it to go first, like your favorite contact and all that sort of thing. But Heroes you can actually play going second, and that's kind of like a way I'm leaning towards right now. Heroes are very good and consistent once you get the combos to go off. The main problem is that there's so many hand traps and interruptions now in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! That can be very hard to get your combos going. So with the idea of going second Heroes is you put in a lot of board breakers like your Dark Ruler no more, your Forbidden Droplet and everything, just negate as much as you can, and then you're able to pop off with your regular combos. That's what's really good about this deck, and one thing I really like. I'm not the biggest fan of the way heroes have kind of gone with the favorite contact and the Neos aspect of it all, especially because Neos in your hand is just such a brick. I would rather run Evil Hero Dusted Gold Dark Calling engine in order to get your Malicious Bane, because Malicious Bane is just a really good OTK enabler as well. The fact that he can't be destroyed by battle or card effects is really powerful, and the fact that he has a very powerful monster effect that he's able to essentially wipe the board with monsters that have less attack than them is really good at enabling board wipes for an OTK. And heroes have such powerful monsters that are able to just take control of the board and go in for big damage. Of course, there's a lot of different monsters in the archetype that are able to boost up their attacks. Sunrise is able to boost attacks, Dread Decimator is able to increase attack, and even DPE is able to lower the attack of your opponent's monsters as well. It means heroes have plenty of ways to like manipulate the attack stats of all your hero monsters and just go in for massive damage. I definitely think going second heroes is very powerful. It's really fun to play as well. And it's quite unique when you're playing heroes this way, because if you're playing just regular heroes where your favorite contact and everything, people kind of know what to expect with it. But if you're planning on going second and using a bunch of board breakers, you kind of catch your opponent off guard. So I definitely think going second heroes is definitely high end of it's over 9,000.
Next up, we have Skull Servants. Everyone loves the spooky boys. Where do you think? Maybe something like... Because I don't know, they're more of a going second deck than Dinos, and they have a lot of tools, and they have Grass back now. But it is kind of gimmicky, it is kind of fragile, I think, Skull Servants. But what do you think? You're the Skull Servant player here.
I definitely agree, it is definitely very fragile, especially get interrupted. But one thing I would make the case that I would argue it's actually a lot more powerful now than it's been before is because of the Horus engine. And Horus is just really good for Skull Servants, and it actually made them really powerful. So I agree where it is right now in the middle of Tenpai dragging these nuts. Just because I think Skull Servants, the main gimmick is you get a bunch of your white monsters into the graveyard. They count as Skull Servant while they're in the graveyard, and then your King of Skull Servant on the field gains 1,000 attack for every Skull Servant in your grave. So this guy can get up to a ridiculous amount of attack, which is really great and really funny if you're able to pop it off. This used to be really difficult. Some issues with the deck was consistency. It can be really difficult to get consistent with Skull Servants, so you want to be having a bunch of cards that are able to like draw or even mill your deck. But now, thanks to the Horus engine, you're able to use the Horus engine, able to dump some of your guys, bring them back out for a rank 8, such as the Zombie Vampire, which is able to just mill 5 cards, which is fantastic on its own. But not only that, Grass is back as well. There's so many ways you can mill, and even with the new white monster, you're able to just get so many of your Skull Servants into the graveyard to boost this guy up to a ridiculous amount of attack. He's a little bit fragile, but if you're able to pull this off, it is really cool, really fun. I definitely recommend giving it a try.
Next up, we have Grenmaju. Does anyone like Grenmaju? Like, does anyone actually like this deck? It's cringe. It's cringe Maju. Basically, Grenmaju himself gains 300 attack times the amount of banished cards. So you gain a lot of advantage of using cards like Pot of Prosperity, Pot of Desires, all the pot cards that banish cards, because even face down cards will boost up Grenmaju. You'll be using a lot of graveyard cards like Necroface to banish even more. In Master Duel, you can use Fairytale Snow to banish even more. Basically, the whole idea of the deck is just banish as many cards as you can, no matter how you do it, summon Grenmaju, and attack in for game. You do a bunch of drawing with your pot cards, you draw into board breakers, break your opponent's board, summon Grenmaju, and attack for game. It's really cringe, it doesn't feel good to play against, and it's not even that good. It's very easy to counter, it's not the best, but you know, it's a gimmick, and if you like it, that's fine, but it doesn't feel great to play against, or really to play at all.
The only thing I'd really add to that is one thing that most people complain about Grenmaju is the fact that you're just using a bunch of staples such as the pot cards, like you mentioned, just banish a lot, and then there's literally no skill behind just normal summon Grenmaju, gets massive attack and like smash in for game, especially because he gets like such a ridiculous high amount of attack. But he's also quite vulnerable. You could just try to negate his effects, but that's pretty much just drawing it out, which is essentially for most decks anyways. But I'm just absolutely curious. Any Grenmaju players, just leave in the comments why you like playing this deck. I really don't understand it. Please just explain to me why you enjoy it. That's all I want to know.
Next up, we have Abyss Actors. Abyss Actors as a blind second deck has seen a lot of success, which is really funny. Compared to their results going first, you see a lot of like blind second Abyss Actor decks. A lot of cards in the deck really work well when you're going second. You have a bunch of pendulums who can help you pendulum summon a bunch of monsters. They can gain pretty high attack. A lot of cards in the deck, you gain advantage if they're destroyed. So if your opponent destroys some of your Abyss Actor cards, you gain a lot of advantage. Obviously your opponent's not going to want to do that, but you have cards in the deck that change effects of your opponent's cards too. Your opponent destroys one face down Abyss Actor card you control. Stuff like that. So basically you're forcing your opponent to destroy your Abyss Actor cards to gain their effects. And you're also changing your opponent's effect. If your opponent tries to activate an effect to stop you, you change that into an effect that benefits you, which is really cool. It's a really cool gimmick. The new support helped a lot, making this deck pretty consistent. So I think it's pretty cool. I think it belongs about there. Next up, Galaxy Eyes. Galaxy Eyes, again, it's kind of one of those decks where it's kind of a going first deck, but it can very well function as a going second deck. You get out really big XYZ monsters who can attack multiple times. I wouldn't say the deck's main way to play is going second. You really do want to go first, kind of set up some sort of board, and then use your OTK tools on the following turn to win the game. But you can definitely play this deck as a going second deck. Run a bunch of board breakers, get out your big XYZ monsters. But I'd say it's like very mid as an OTK deck, because it's not a going second deck mainly. It wasn't made primarily as a going second deck. But all your monsters are super big, and your XYZ monsters can attack multiple times. So it definitely functions as a going second OTK deck, but overall it's very mid, so I think it belongs in the pretty much the very middle of the tier list.
Would you say it's better than Heroes though?
No.
Alright, yeah.
Heroes just have so many more tools as a deck, even if you're just talking about going second. Heroes are just a better deck in general. They do have a lot of floodgates, but they also have a lot of going second tools just inherent to them. I think that gives Heroes the edge over Galaxy Eyes. Next up we have Chaos Max. Now, Chaos Max, if you're looking at this deck as Blue Eyes Chaos Max, where you run Chaos Max in a Blue Eyes deck, it's pretty bad. But if you run Chaos Max as your main boss monster in a ritual deck like Dogmatica, I think it's a pretty damn good deck. It's very fun as a going second deck. So basically we'll consider this Dogmatica Chaos Max, because I think that's the best way to play Chaos Max. Your Dogmatica engine is really good at going second specifically, and for getting your ritual cards into rotation. A lot of your Dogmatica cards gain effect if your opponent has a monster, so obviously that's really good for going second. Even stuff like Nadir's Servant, you'll use that to search, but you can also use it to dump stuff like Entis to pop cards, or your Malong to bounce cards, stuff like that. Dogmatica Matrix adds 2 cards if your opponent controls a monster. And Chaos Max himself, obviously, 4k attack, does double piercing damage, so if he attacks into a 0 attack monster, you do 8k damage and you win. So you can use this in combination with cards like Ibli. You can summon Ibli, give to your opponent in defense, and then attack into it and you kill your opponent instantly, which is really cool. Even if your opponent just has 0 attack monsters, you can do this as well. Just attack in, go for game. In combination with your other Dogmatica monsters, they're pretty good at spamming the board. You can use your Dogmatica ritual monsters to boost up your other monsters to really high attack. I just think it's a really cool going second deck. Only issue is, it is only a going second deck. It cannot do much at all going first. But yeah, I think it's really cool. Also does not rely on the extra deck, which is really cool because it's all ritual stuff. So you don't have to worry about getting locked out of the extra deck. You can just summon Chaos Max from your main deck. And that's a really good boss monster to have for going for an OTK.
Yeah, one thing I definitely think is really cool about Chaos Max is with most OTK decks, what the whole gimmick is that they have like multiple big monsters to attack in order to like OTK from there. But with Chaos Max, you're able to just like one punch it if you hit a 0 defense monster because he does double piercing damage, which I just think is really, really funny and way much more fun if you're able to just like do a one punch like OTK rather than like doing a bunch of setup with multiple monsters. I think that's really, really good. And also I like to see good ritual archetypes, you know? Though having this mixed in with Dogmatica is really, really good. I really, really like seeing ritual decks do well. So Chaos Max is definitely very, very good.
Now technically Chaos Max is not over 9,000. However, Numeron Dragon is. So this is this would be considered 8-axis OTK. Essentially, you run a bunch of level 8 monsters to go into number 97 Draglubion. who can summon out number 100 Numeron Dragon, who gains 1000 attack for the total rank of your monsters on the field. So if you get some rank 8s on field, you can get this guy up to around 17,000 attack. If you have 2 rank 8s on the field, he can be at 17,000 attack and just attacking for game. The whole gimmick is you run cards like Kaijus and Uninterrupted Kaiju Slumber, so you break your opponent's board, you get a level 8 Kaiju on your field, you run cards like Gizmek Orochi to get more level 8 bodies on the field, and it's also a really good card at destroying your opponent's monsters. You run the Dangers as well, who special summon themselves and they're level 8. So you basically use all these cards. You can also run stuff like Super Poly to get out cards like Starving Venom, who's also level 8. And then your main play is basically to go for a big attack with your Numeron Dragon by getting a bunch of level 8s on field. And it's really cool. Genuinely, it's a very cool strategy. Fairly fragile, to be honest, because it is very much a going second deck. You will not play this deck going first. It cannot really do anything going first. But it's really cool. It has seen tops over the years, which is cool. I think it's kind of like the pinnacle of a going second deck, because it's not one strategy. It's basically a bunch of different strategies, all aiming for the same goal of summoning number 100 to attack your opponent for game. I think it's really cool. I think it has a lot of really unique stuff about it. So I think it belongs about there.
Yeah, I definitely agree. As I mentioned with Chaos Max, I think it's a lot more funny when you're able to get like one monster up to a ridiculous amount of attack and one punch it rather than having like a bunch of monsters. So I definitely agree. It belongs in its spot right next to Chaos Max in this tier list.
Next up we have Scareclaw. Scareclaw is okay. I'm not 100% sure if this deck is built as a going second deck. It has a lot of going second tools, but it can also be used going first, which I guess we can say that's a point in its favor. Essentially, you're special summoning your Scareclaw monsters. With the field spell, you can pop cards. Your big Link Tree monster, Tryhard, is really good because it gains effects depending on which Scareclaw monsters you have in field. Some effects give it piercing, some effects give it multiple attacks. It's just really good at getting some quick OTKs. It's pretty much a one-card combo deck as well. Pretty much any of your Scareclaw monsters go into a really good combo. Your field spell can pop cards, which is really good. If you have to go first, you can kind of floodgate your opponent with your Tryhard. And your Tryhard also puts your opponent's monsters into defense, which can be really good because a lot of monsters in the game have lower defense and attack. So I can help you OTK with piercing and stuff like that. It might be a bit gimmicky, it might not be the best deck in the game, but I think it's a pretty cool going second deck. I think it definitely can take games. Next up, Ancient Gears. Unfortunately, I cannot put it above Tenpai, but maybe if Tenpai gets completely banned, we can put Ancient Gears as the best OTK deck in the game. Ancient Gears have access to so many tools. First of all, it is built as a going second deck. This deck has no real plan going first. All the cards really need your opponent to control monsters. Cards like Ballista and Statue and your Tanker, they need your opponent to be controlling a monster for you to gain effects. Chaos Ancient Gear Giant attacks all your opponent's monsters with 4500 attack, unaffected by spell and trap card effects, does piercing, and during the battle phase your opponent can activate monster effects. So pretty much once you make this card and go to the battle phase, you win the duel. Also, a lot of the Ancient Gear cards have the effect where during the damage step your opponent can activate spell trap or monster effects, which is really good because it basically means if you make it to battle phase with a big Ancient Gear monster, you win the duel. You might be thinking the challenge is to make it to the battle phase, but you have so much inherent protection. Ancient Gear Fortress is basically Sanguine Summoning on crack. Whilst on the field, your opponent cannot respond to the effects of your Ancient Gear cards, and they cannot be targeted or destroyed by card effects. And it's also not once per turn, so if your opponent has one way to interact with your Ancient Gear Fortress, you can just play another one, and then you can basically do your full combo uninterrupted, which is insane. Alongside the new card Ancient Gear Duel, which gives all of your monsters that mention Ancient Gear Golem the effect where they're unaffected by monster effects, means that you can pretty reliably play through cards like Nibiru, which is great. But the main strength of Ancient Gears is really all in Fortress, where your opponent cannot respond to your card effects, so you cannot get ashed, you can't get impermed or effect veilered. It's just really, really good. The deck was genuinely built to be a going second deck. Your monsters can make multiple attacks, they get really big, they can spam the board. Howitzer can even lower your opponent's monster's attack to set up for an OTK. It is just built to be a really good going second deck, and unironically I think this deck is one of the best going second decks in the game. If Tenpai wasn't as good as it is, I think Ancient Gears would be the best going second deck Yu-Gi-Oh's ever seen. Next up, Mekanko. Mekanko is very much built to be a going second deck. Mekanko is very funny because it needs your opponent to have a monster on field. The main gimmick is that you get a Mekanko monster on field, they all have 0 attack. While they have an equip card equipped to them, your opponent takes any battle damage you would take. So essentially, you summon a bunch of very small monsters with 0 attack, you attack into your opponent's monsters and they take the damage. So you pretty much go for an OTK there, you let your opponent set up a bunch of big bodies, and you kill them off of that. But they have so many more tools than that. Their equip cards are really strong. They have a trap card that basically can equip a card from your deck to an appropriate target. So of course you can equip a card from your deck to your own monster, or you can equip cards like Axe of Despair, which negates a monster effect on the field, to your opponent's monster, so it basically acts as an imperm, which is really cool. Going first, you can summon stuff like Acid Golem, which is a one-sided floodgate, which is really strong. You can run board breakers, you can run cards that give your opponent monsters. You can even run equip cards that boost your opponent's monster's attack. So if your opponent has a, let's just say a 10k Skull Servant on field, you can boost it up even higher and attack into it and win in one turn.
Hypothetically speaking, of course.
Never happened. This is not how it needs to end. Fuck's sake.
We're gonna go up by 700, might as well.
So it's a really cool going second deck, and I've seen a lot of success since it came out. So I think it definitely belongs very, very high up in Tenpai Dragon These Nuts.
What really made me laugh about Mekanko is just that the gimmick is so unique that you kind of just roll with it. I think it's really, really funny, and just seeing it in action when we were playing Master Duel, I thought it was just really, really funny, and it looked like a lot of fun to play. I think it's definitely one of these decks I'd like to play at some point, and yeah, I definitely look forward to building in the future.
Next up, Exodia. Now, Exodia can be played both as going first and going second deck, but the deck has a lot of tools that really work well going second. So you can main deck stuff like Lava Golem or Sphere Mode, because you don't really need to normal summon. You run Shifter in the main, which can just shut down your opponent's turn entirely. And the main gimmick is that you summon your new fusion monster, the Unstoppable Exodia Incarnate, who when he attacks, gains attack equal to your life points. So if you're at 8k and your opponent has no monsters on field, you just attack for game, because he gains 8k attack. But also, he can search the card Obliterate Blaze, which can give your Exodia monster the effect where you can equip 5 Exodia pieces from your hand, deck, or grave to your Exodia monster, and he gains 2k attack for each. So already you have your Exodia at 10k attack. And you can also attack in and use his battle phase effect, where he just gains attack equal to your life points. So really good for going for game. He also has access to a spell Trap Negate, which is just even better, and he can't be destroyed by card effects, which is just fantastic. So a really cool, funny way to play Exodia. It's really cool that you can play it as a going first and going second deck, but it just has access to a lot of really cool going second options, so I think it belongs pretty high up.
Yeah, it's definitely very good. One thing that annoys me about this deck is how it can so effortlessly bring out high level, high attack monsters just for the cost of next to nothing. Which, like, if you don't get your Exodia stuff to go off, it's fine. You still have, like, big, beefy monsters on the field anyways. It's really, really good at going second, and who doesn't love Exodia?
Next up, Cyber Dragons. I think it has to be top tier.
Oh, yeah. It definitely belongs where it is right now. We have it just behind Tenpai and Ancient Gears. Cyber Dragons, oh my god. One of my favorite decks of all time. It's really, really good. I love that it can use a bunch of other generic machine support in it in order to like get it to like a next level. If you're using like machine duplication, limited removal, power bond, it's fantastic for all of that. But what I really, really like about Cyber Dragons is the fact that what the main gimmick is that you're able to contact fuse away your opponent's board. So what's really, really great about this is that it's an OTK deck that's able to chip away your opponent's monsters without destroying them or sending them to the graveyard for like some sort of destruction or removal effect. You're able to use it to your advantage as materials for your own fusion monsters. Especially when you're putting this in contact with a Clockwork Knight and Chimeric Fortress Dragon, you're able to contact fuse pretty much your opponent's entire board to leave them with nothing and have you a really, really big monster. That's really great in itself. But not only that, what Cyber Dragons are able to do as well is they're able to take advantage of some other ways to cheat out big monsters as well, because even if you use that contact fusing to go into Fortress and attack in for big damage, if that didn't do it, Duality works well with this deck as well. There's so many different cards that work well with Cyber Dragon that you can get really, really creative with how you build this deck. But one of the main ways I recommend is 3 copies of a Clockwork Knight and doing whatever you can to contact fuse your opponent's board away. It is absolutely insane. Cyber Dragon is a fan favorite archetype for years now. This is the card that ended GOAT format, so you know it's been around for a long, long time, and it's had a lot of support to help it. I do think it's a bit slower now compared to like what modern Yu-Gi-Oh is. Ancient Gears got a load of support recently that made them like elevate to the next level of where the deck needs to be, and I think Cyber Dragons deserve the same treatment as well. But as of right now, it still holds against its own against a bunch of the other going second deck. But I still think it's really, really good. Just needs a little bit more support. I'm a bit disappointed with the new fusion that's coming out soon, where it's like 2 light machine monsters to go into it, because everyone's like, oh, it's a Cyber Dragon card essentially. But it kind of ruins the essence of Cyber Dragon. You want a big beat stick that's able to attack in for game, and this guy has a 0 attack and big defense that just doesn't negate. I think that's not good at all. One thing I really like about Cyber Dragons as well is that although it's an OTK going second deck, you can also kind of cheat out going first as well. If you're able to set up your Nova into an Infinity, Infinity is a great boss monster too that has an Omni negate that's also able to suck up monsters, and it's absolutely great. Play Cyber Dragon, it's amazing.
And finally we have Crusadia. I think Crusadia is pretty much better as Scareclaw. It basically does exactly what Scareclaw does, but like it did it first. You link climb and you gain effects depending on how many guys you have in field. So your link monster is able to gain attack based on the monsters it points to, which can be really good because you can give your opponent some monsters that have really high attack. You have your guy point to your own monsters, gain a bunch of attack, and attack in for a bunch of damage. And you can even double his attack when he attacks, which is pretty insane. At one point this was a really good OTK deck. It has fallen off a lot. You don't really see people playing this deck anymore. But it is cool, and I definitely saw it a bunch of Master Duel when Master Duel first came out. A pretty cool going second deck. I think it's pretty unique and pretty cool. I think we'll make one final change. We'll put Numeron up a bit. Numeron, I hate to say it, but it's not a bad deck. Like, we'll put it here. It can do stuff. It's annoying for a reason because it's really good at what it does. It is a going second deck. It can steal games. We'll put it up there. It's not bad. So that's it for the tier list. So let us know what you think in the comments. I think overall this is pretty good. A lot of these decks are not necessarily going second decks, but they can be played going second. And I think that means a lot because decks like Dinosaur can be played both ways, but decks that have a bunch of tools for going second as well as going first are just really cool. So let us know what you think in the comments. Thanks for watching. Give us suggestions for more tier lists in the future. If you want to see these videos early, we do have channel memberships, so you can have early access to all of our videos if you're interested. Also, if you wanted to build any of these decks, maybe check out our affiliate links in the description. We have a TCG affiliate link, which you can check out. They directly support the channel and help us keep up with making good videos. So thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more content.